Some chains are forged in iron, others in silence. The dungeon smelled of rust and forgotten prayers. Alara knelt on cold stone, wrists bound in silver that burned like frozen fire against her skin. Above her, the castle breathed, footsteps, laughter, the clinking of goblets at some distant feast. She had stopped counting the days. Time meant nothing when you were already dead. They had called her broken, defective, an omega without scent, without value. Her own father had signed the decree, his hand steady as he condemned her to the chains. Better she rot here than shame our bloodline further. The words still echoed, sharper than any blade. The silver ate at her slowly. It didn't kill. It simply reminded her every moment that she was less. That the goddess had turned her face away. That even the moon, which should have sung to her omega soul, looked through her like glass. Alara closed her eyes and let the cold seep deeper. If this was her end, let it come quietly. Let her fade into stone and shadow, unmissed and unmourned. Then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps, something heavier, more deliberate. The scrape of metal against stone, a low growl that vibrated through the walls themselves. The dungeon door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Iron shrieked. Torchlight flooded the darkness, and with it came a presence so vast, so overwhelming, that Alara's breath caught in her throat. He stood framed in firelight and ruin, a man built like war itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a torn cloak that had once been royal blue. Blood streaked his jaw. His eyes burned gold, feral and ancient, and they swept the dungeon with a predator's focus. Then they found her. The world stopped. Alara felt it like a blow to the chest, a pull so primal, so absolute, that her body moved before her mind could catch up. Her wolf, silent for so long, stirred, whimpered, recognized, mate. No, impossible. She had no scent, no bond. She was nothing. But he was already moving toward her, his boots heavy on stone, his gaze never leaving hers. The guards who had followed him into the dungeon froze, their weapons raised but useless. One look from him and they scattered like ash in wind. He dropped to one knee before her, and the sheer size of him made her feel small, fragile. His hand, calloused, scarred, reached out, hovering just above the silver chains. "Who did this to you?" His voice was low, rough, threaded with barely contained rage. Alara couldn't speak. Her throat had forgotten how. His jaw tightened. He gripped the chains and she flinched, expecting pain. But his hands began to glow, soft golden light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The silver hissed, smoking as it melted under his touch. The bonds fell away, clattering to the floor. Alara gasped. Her wrists were raw, bleeding, but free. He caught her before she could collapse, his arm sliding around her waist. His warmth was shocking after so long in the cold. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, against her ribs. "I am Kale," he said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "Alpha King of the Northern Reach, and you?" His eyes searched hers, desperate and certain all at once. "You are mine." She shook her head weakly. "I'm no one. I'm broken." "Then I will be broken with you." Above them, the castle began to shake. Kyle carried her through corridors that reeked of decay and old cruelty. Alara wanted to tell him to put her down, that she could walk, but her legs wouldn't obey. The silver had stolen more than her strength. It had hollowed her out, left her a shell. Behind them, shouts erupted. The guards had finally found their courage or their foolishness. Cale didn't slow. He simply raised one hand, and the air itself seemed to ripple. A wall of force slammed into the soldiers, sending them sprawling. "Who are you?" Alara whispered against his chest. "A king who has lost his way," he said, "and perhaps a fool who has finally found it." They burst into the great hall, where the feast was still underway. Nobles in silk and velvet turned, goblets frozen mid-air. At the head of the table sat her father, Lord Merrick, broad and bearded, his face flushed with wine and rage. "You dare?" he began, rising. Cale set Alara down gently, keeping himself between her and the room. "I dare everything," he said, his voice carrying like thunder. "This woman was chained in your dungeon, tortured, left to die. Explain yourself, Lord, or I will paint these walls with your answers." Merrick's face went pale, then red. "She is defective, an omega without scent. She brought shame to—" "Shame." Cale's laugh was bitter, sharp. "You speak of shame while you feast above her suffering?" The hall went silent. Alara felt every eye on her, pitying, curious, disgusted. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the floor. But Cale's presence anchored her, steady and immovable. "She is coming with me," Cale said. "And if any man here lifts a hand to stop me, I will teach him the true meaning of chains." Merrick's hand moved toward his sword. Cale's eyes flashed gold, and the temperature in the room dropped. Frost crept across the stone floor, across the table, freezing wine in cups and breath in lungs. "Choose wisely," Cale said softly. Merrick's hand fell. His gaze slid to Alara, and for a moment she saw something flicker there. Regret, perhaps, or only fear. Then he looked away. "Take her," he said hoarsely. "She was never ours to keep." Cale turned, lifting Alara once more. As they walked toward the shattered door, she glanced back one last time. The hall that had been her prison, her shame, her entire world. It looked smaller now, emptier. Outside, the night was clear and cold. Snow glittered under a full moon that seemed impossibly bright. Cale's horse, a massive black stallion, waited, pawing at the ground. He lifted her onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her, steady and sure, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Alara felt safe. "Where are we going?" she asked. "North," he said, "to my kingdom, to a place where chains are forbidden and every soul is worth defending." The horse surged forward, and the castle fell away behind them. As they rode, Alara felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. She didn't know if she could trust this stranger, this king who spoke of worth and freedom. But she knew one thing. She wanted to try. They rode through forests where moonlight turned snow to silver. Kyle said nothing, and Alara was grateful. Words felt too heavy, too fragile. Instead, she let herself feel the steady rhythm of the horse, the warmth of Cale's body at her back, the crisp bite of winter air. After hours, they stopped at the edge of a frozen lake. Kyle dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled, but his hands steadied her. "Rest," he said, guiding her toward a cluster of pines. Beneath their shelter, the ground was dry, carpeted in needles. He built a fire with practiced ease, no flint, just a touch of his hand. Flames sprang up, golden and warm. Ilara sank down beside it, pulling her torn cloak tighter. Kyle settled across from her, his gaze distant, troubled. "You glow," she said suddenly. "When you touch the chains, what are you?" He looked at her, and something ancient flickered in his eyes. "Cursed," he said. "Blessed, I no longer know the difference." "Tell me." He was silent for a long moment. Then, 3 years ago, I led my people into war. We were betrayed, not by enemies, but by one of our own, my brother." His jaw tightened. He opened the gates. "Let the enemy in. Thousands died. My mate," his voice cracked, "she was among them." Ilara's breath caught. "I killed him," Kale continued, his voice flat. "My own blood. And in my rage I called upon the old gods, the ones we are not meant to summon. They answered, gave me power, strength, fire, the ability to break any bond. But they took something in return." "What?" "My ability to feel," he said. "Joy, sorrow, love, all of it dulled, distant. I became a king of ash and ice, untouchable, until—" his eyes found hers, "until I walked into that dungeon and saw you." Ilara's heart hammered. "I don't understand." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But when I touched those chains, when I felt your pain—" He shook his head. "It was the first real thing I've felt in 3 years. You woke something in me, Ilara, something I thought was dead." She stared at him, this king of ruin and redemption, and felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm broken," she whispered. "I have no scent, no worth. I can't be what you—" "You are everything," he said fiercely. "Do you hear me? Everything." The fire crackled between them. Above, the moon watched, luminous and knowing. Ilara felt it then, a warmth spreading through her chest, unfurling like spring after endless winter. Her wolf, silent for so long, lifted its head. And for the first time, she felt it. The bond. Faint, fragile, but real. Kyle felt it too. She saw it in the way his eyes widened, the way his breath caught. He reached across the fire, palm up, an offering. Slowly, Ilara placed her hand in his. The world exploded into light. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The vision came like a flood. Ilara saw through Kale's eyes, a battlefield soaked in blood and rain. Wolves tearing at each other, howls splitting the sky. A woman with dark hair and kind eyes reaching for him even as the blade found her heart. His brother's face, twisted with grief and madness, shouting words that were lost to chaos. Then darkness, cold so deep it burned, and a voice ancient and terrible. Power for feeling, strength for joy. This is the bargain. Ilara gasped, pulling her hand away. The vision shattered. She was back by the fire, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Kyle was watching her, his expression unreadable. "You saw," he said, not a question. "Yes." Her voice was raw. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't be." He stood, pacing to the edge of the firelight. "You carry something, Ilara, a gift I've never encountered. You don't just feel, you see. You understand." "I don't want to see pain," she whispered. "There's enough of it already." He turned back to her. "What if understanding pain is the only way to heal it?" She had no answer. They sat in silence, the fire burning low. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she curled up on the ground, her cloak pulled tight. She felt Kale move closer, settling beside her, not touching, but near enough that his warmth reached her. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'll keep watch." She wanted to protest, but her body betrayed her. As she drifted off, she heard him speak again, so softly she almost missed it. "Thank you for seeing me. Not the king. Just me." In her dreams, she walked through a forest of silver trees. The moon hung low and huge, and beneath it stood a woman in white, impossibly beautiful, impossibly sad. "Child of sorrow," the woman said, her voice like wind through leaves. "You carry the sight, the gift of the Pathfinder." "What does that mean?" Ilara asked. "You see the threads that bind us, past to present, pain to healing, soul to soul. You were born to walk between worlds, to guide the lost back to themselves. I'm not strong enough." The woman smiled. "Strength is not force, little one. It is choosing mercy when the world demands vengeance. It is holding light when darkness presses close. You are stronger than you know." She reached out, pressing a hand to Ilara's chest. Heat bloomed there, golden and fierce. "Find the truth buried in his sorrow. Only then will both of you be free." Ilara woke to dawn, breaking over the frozen lake, painting the ice in shades of rose and amber. Kyle was crouched by the fire, coaxing it back to life. He looked up as she stirred, and something in his expression had softened. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I've been walking through someone else's nightmare." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Welcome to my world." She sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees. "Your brother," she said carefully. "What was his name?" Kale's hands stilled. "Lucian." "Did you love him?" "More than anything." His voice was hollow. "That's what made it unforgivable." Ilara studied him, this king who carried his castle like a wound. "What if he didn't betray you?" she said quietly. Kale's head snapped up, eyes flashing. "I saw him. He opened the gates. What if you saw what someone wanted you to see?" Silence. Then, slowly, Kyle stood. He walked to the lake's edge, staring out at the endless white. "If you're right," he said finally, "then I killed an innocent man, my own brother." "Or," Ilara said, rising to join him, "you were manipulated by someone who wanted you broken. Who wanted you to carry this guilt forever?" He looked at her, something desperate and raw in his gaze. "Why would you say this? Why try to absolve me?" "Because I know what it's like to carry a lie," she said. "To believe you're worthless because someone else decided you were. And I know that the truth, however terrible, is better than living in a cage built from someone else's cruelty." Kale turned away, but not before she saw the tears. This king, this warrior, this broken man, weeping by a frozen lake as the sun rose. And Ilara, who had spent so long feeling nothing, reached out and took his hand. This time, the vision was gentler. She saw Lucian, younger, laughing, running through castle halls with a boy who looked just like Kyle. She saw two brothers who loved each other fiercely. She saw Lucian's face on that final night, not twisted with madness, but with terror. She saw him shouting, not orders, but a warning. "It's a trap! Kyle, it's a trap!" And behind him, in the shadows, a figure in a hooded cloak, smiling. Ilara released Kale's hand, breathing hard. "You need to go back," she said. "Someone is still there. Someone who wants you to suffer." Kyle stared at her. Who? I don't know, but they're waiting. They rode hard for 2 days, barely stopping. Kyle's kingdom rose from the northern mountains like a fortress carved from ice and stone. Towers pierced the sky, their banners, silver wolves on midnight blue, snapping in the wind. As they approached the gates, guards straightened, eyes widening. Your Majesty, one stammered. We thought— I live, Kale said curtly. Summon the council, immediately. He dismounted, then helped Alara down. She felt the weight of dozens of stairs, curious and calculating. Whispers followed them as Kale led her through the courtyard into the castle itself. It was beautiful and cold, marble floors, vaulted ceilings, tapestries depicting battles long past. But it felt empty, like a tomb dressed as a palace. Kale brought her to a chamber high in the eastern tower. A fire roared in the hearth. The bed was enormous, draped in furs. Rest here, he said. You're safe. Where are you going? To find answers. His jaw was tight. If someone betrayed me, if Lucian was innocent, I will know by nightfall. Alara caught his arm. Be careful. If they've hidden their treachery this long, they won't reveal it easily. He covered her hand with his. Then it's fortunate I'm no longer interested in being careful. He left, and Alara was alone. She moved to the window, looking out over the kingdom. Snow blanketed everything, pristine and merciless. She pressed her palm to the glass, feeling the cold seep through. What am I doing here? She thought. I'm nobody. A broken omega in a king's castle, playing at being important. But then she remembered the vision, the woman in white, the warmth in her chest. You carry the sight. She closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for that golden thread. It was there, faint but steady, connecting her to something vast and ancient. She followed it, deeper and deeper, until a name whispered on the edge of consciousness. Sylvan. Alara's eyes snapped open. She didn't know who Sylvan was, but the name carried weight. Danger. She needed to tell Kale. She left the chamber, hurrying through the halls. Servants scattered at her approach, unsure what to make of this strange, scarred woman. She followed Kale's scent, sharp pine and smoke, down, down, into the castle's depths. The council chamber was vast, circular, lit by torches. Kyle stood at its center, facing a half-dozen men and women in formal robes. They turned as Alara entered, surprise flickering across their faces. My king, one said, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. This is a private. She stays, Kale said flatly. Alara moved to his side. Sylvan, she said quietly. Every face in the room went pale. Kale's hand went to his sword. What did you say? Sylvan, Alara repeated louder now. That name means something. Who is it? The silver-haired woman stepped forward. Sylvan was the king's advisor. 3 years ago, after the betrayal, he disappeared. Disappeared, Kyle's voice was deadly soft. Or fled. We assumed he was killed in the attack, another counselor said hastily. But you never found a body. It wasn't a question. Silence. Kyle turned to Alara. How do you know that name? I don't, she admitted. But the goddess does. She showed me. The counselors exchanged glances, skeptical, uncertain. But Kyle was staring at her like she'd just handed him the key to his own prison. Find him, he said, addressing the room. Search every record, every witness. If Sylvan lives, I want him brought before me. Now go." They scattered. Within moments, only Cale and Alara remained. "If Sylvan orchestrated this," Cale said slowly, "if he used my brother as a pawn—" "Then you have a chance to make it right," Alara finished, "not to undo the past, but to honor it." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw hope in his eyes, fragile, tentative, but real. "You are extraordinary," he said softly. "I'm a broken Omega who sees things," she corrected. "No." He stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her cheek. "You are the woman who walked into my darkness and lit a torch. Don't ever call yourself broken again." Her breath caught. The bond between them flared, bright and warm, and she felt her wolf stir, stronger now, more certain. "Kyle—" The door burst open. A guard, breathless and wild-eyed. "Your Majesty, we found him. Sylvan. He's in the lower city, in the old temple district." Kyle's expression hardened. He looked at Alara. "Stay here." "No." She straightened, meeting his gaze. "If I'm part of this, I see it through." He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Together, then." The old temple district was a graveyard of faith. Stone gods watched with blind eyes as Kyle, Alara, and a dozen guards moved through the ruins. Snow had drifted into doorways, covering altars and offerings long abandoned. Kyle's hand rested on his sword. Beside him, Alara walked with her head high, though fear coiled in her stomach. She could feel it, a wrongness in the air, like a wound that refused to heal. They found Sylvan in the largest temple, kneeling before a cracked statue of the moon goddess. He was smaller than Alara had imagined, thin, balding, wrapped in a cloak that had once been fine, but was now threadbare. He didn't turn as they entered. "I wondered when you would come," he said, his voice reedy and tired. Cale stopped 10 paces away. "Why?" Sylvan laughed, a bitter sound. "Straight to the heart, as always." "Very well." He stood slowly, facing them. His eyes were hollow, ringed with shadow. "Because you were too strong, my king, too beloved. The people would have followed you into the abyss. So you sent me there yourself." "I opened the gates," Sylvan said simply. "I told your brother it was your command, that you wanted the enemy admitted for negotiations. He trusted you, obeyed." He smiled, thin and cruel. "And when you saw him standing there, with blood on his hands and betrayal in his eyes, you did exactly what I knew you would. You killed him." Cale's hand tightened on his sword, but he didn't draw it. "Why?" he asked again, his voice breaking. "Because I loved her," Sylvan spat. "Your mate, your precious Lyanna. She was mine first, did you know? Before you, before your crown, she loved me, but you took her. You always take everything." Alara felt Cale's anguish like a knife to the chest. She stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. "You're wrong," she said quietly. Sylvan's gaze slid to her. "And who are you? Another pet? Another conquest?" "I'm the one who sees," Alara said, "and I see a man who confused love with possession, who destroyed 2 lives, 3 lives, because he couldn't bear to let go." "You know nothing," Sylvan hissed. "I know grief," Alara said. "I know what it's like to be cast aside, to feel worthless. But I also know that turning that pain outward, using it to wound others, doesn't heal anything. It just spreads the poison." Sylvan's face twisted. "You think you can judge me? You, a broken little Omega who—" "Enough," Kyle said, his voice like iron. He moved past Alara, stopping directly before Sylvan. "You will be tried for treason, for murder, for the deaths of thousands. But before that," he leaned close, "I want you to know something. You didn't break me. You thought you did. You thought guilt and rage would hollow me out forever. But you were wrong." He glanced back at Alara, and his expression softened. "Because she found me. And she reminded me that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing every day to be better than your worst moment." Sylvan's laugh was hollow. "Pretty words, but your brother is still dead. And you still killed him." "Yes," Cale said, "I did, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. But I won't carry your lies anymore." He nodded to the guards. "Take him." As they dragged Sylvan away, screaming curses and accusations, Ilara felt the temple shift. The air grew warmer, lighter, and the statue of the goddess, cracked and forgotten, seemed for just a moment to smile. Cale turned to Ilara. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing what I couldn't, for believing I was worth saving." She reached for his hand. "We saved each other." Outside, dawn was breaking, soft gold spilling across the snow. As they walked back toward the castle, Alara felt the bond between them deepen, settle. It wasn't fireworks or destiny. It was something quieter, something earned. Kyle stopped at the castle gates, pulling her close. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, "but I know I want you in it, not as a subject, not as a prize, as my equal, my partner, if you'll have me." Alara looked up at him, this king who had torn down a castle to free her, who had faced his darkest truth and chosen light. "Yes," she whispered. And when he kissed her, the world fell away. There was only warmth and hope, and the quiet certainty that some chains once broken can never be forged again. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Winter gave way to spring slowly in the north. Snow melted into streams that sang through the valleys, and the first green shoots pushed through frozen earth. Alara watched it all from the castle balcony. A fur cloak wrapped around her shoulders. She had been here for 2 months now. 2 months of learning the castle's rhythms, of meeting Cale's people, of discovering that she was not, in fact, broken. Her gift, the sight, had grown stronger. She could sense emotions now, read the threads that connected people. It was overwhelming at times, but also beautiful. Kyle found her there, as he always did. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "That this doesn't feel real," she admitted. 6 months ago, I was chained in a dungeon. Now I'm standing in a king's castle, watching spring arrive." "Do you regret it?" "Never." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "But I wonder sometimes if I'm enough, if I can truly be what you need." "You already are," he said simply. "You taught me that strength isn't about power. It's about choosing compassion even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She smiled, but it faded quickly. "There's something I need to tell you." His expression grew serious. "What is it?" "I had a vision last night about Lucian." Kyle went still. "What did you see?" "A forest, a grave marker, and your brother." She hesitated. "He was standing there, Kyle, not as a ghost, as a memory, and he was smiling." Cale's breath caught. "What did he say?" "He said, 'Tell my brother I forgive him, and that I'm proud of the man he's become.'" Tears streamed down Cale's face, silent and unashamed. Alara held him as he wept. This king, who had carried guilt like armor for so long. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were clearer than she'd ever seen them. "I need to go to him," he said. "To his grave. Will you come with me?" "Always." They rode out that afternoon, just the two of them. The grave was in a forest clearing, marked by a simple stone carved with a wolf. Kyle knelt before it, placing a hand on the cold granite. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Lucian. I should have trusted you. I should have—" "He knows," Alara said softly, kneeling beside him. "I can feel it. He's at peace." Kyle closed his eyes, and for a long moment they stayed there in silence. Then he stood, pulling Alara to her feet. "I want to build something here," he said. "A monument. Not to guilt or sorrow, but to memory, to the truth." "What kind of monument?" "A sanctuary," he said. "A place where anyone, Omega, Alpha, Beta, can come when they're broken. Where chains are forbidden and every soul is valued. We'll call it Lucian's Light." Ilara's heart swelled. "It's perfect." They returned to the castle as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. That night, Cale stood before his council and announced the sanctuary. Some objected, too costly, too radical, but Cale was unmoved. "This kingdom was built on strength," he said. "But strength without mercy is tyranny. We will be better. We must be." And slowly the council nodded. Construction began the next week. Alara threw herself into the work, helping to design the sanctuary, to choose its caretakers. She found purpose in it, a way to transform her own pain into something healing. One evening, as she and Cale walked through the half-built structure, he took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said, about us, about the future." He stopped, turning to face her. "Alara, I know we haven't known each other long, but I also know that you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are my redemption, my hope, my home." He dropped to one knee, pulling a ring from his pocket. It was simple, silver, inlaid with a moonstone that glowed softly. "Will you marry me?" he asked, "not because of destiny or bonds or duty, but because I love you. And I want to spend every day proving that you were never broken. You were just waiting for someone strong enough to see your light." Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. She could only nod, tears streaming down her face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and kissed her beneath the rising moon. The wedding took place on the first day of summer. The castle was transformed, banners of silver and blue, flowers braided into archways, tables laden with food and wine. People came from across the kingdom and beyond, curious to see the broken Omega who had become a queen. Alara stood in her chamber, staring at her reflection. The dress was simple but elegant, white silk that fell in soft folds, embroidered with silver wolves. Her hair, once matted and tangled, now fell in loose waves. She looked like someone else, someone whole. A knock at the door. "Come in," she called. It was one of the servants, a young woman named Mira, who had been kind from the start. "You look beautiful, my lady," she said shyly. "Thank you." Alara took a deep breath. "Is it time?" "Almost. The king is waiting." Alara walked through the castle halls, flanked by attendants. Her heart hammered, but not with fear, with anticipation, with joy. The ceremony took place in the courtyard, beneath the open sky. Kyle stood at the altar, dressed in formal robes of midnight blue. When he saw her, his expression transformed, awe and love and something that looked like prayer. She took his hands, and the officiant began. The words washed over her, promises of partnership, of loyalty, of choosing each other every day. When it came time for vows, Kyle spoke first. "Ilara," he said, his voice steady and sure. "You found me in darkness and refused to let me stay there. You saw my worst and chose to stay anyway. I vow to spend every day earning that choice, to honor your strength, to cherish your gifts, and to stand beside you, not as a king, but as a man who loves you more than breath itself." Ilara's vision blurred with tears. "Kale," she said, her voice breaking, "you taught me that I was never broken, that suffering doesn't define us. Our choices do. I vow to walk with you through every storm, to share your burdens and your joys, and to remind you, always, that mercy and strength are not opposites. They are the same thing." The officiant smiled. "By the light of the moon and the strength of the pack, I pronounce you bonded, king and queen, alpha and omega, partners in all things." Kale cupped her face, kissing her as the crowd erupted in cheers. Ilara felt the bond snap fully into place, bright and unbreakable, a thread of gold that connected their souls. The feast that followed was a blur of laughter and music. Ilara danced with Kale, with counselors, with servants who had become friends. She saw faces, some joyful, some skeptical, some simply curious. But she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she felt free. As the night wore on, Kyle pulled her aside, leading her to the castle ramparts. Below, the kingdom stretched out, lights twinkling like stars, the forests dark and deep. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," she said. But, I keep waiting for it to end, for something to go wrong." He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not cursed. You are not unworthy. You are a queen, Ilara, my queen, and whatever comes, we face it together." She leaned into him, breathing in his scent, pine and smoke and home. "Together," she echoed. Above them, the moon shone bright and full, a silent witness to promises made and kept. A year passed. Lucian's light was completed, a sanctuary of stone and glass, nestled at the forest's edge. It became a refuge for the broken, the rejected, the forgotten. Omegas without scent, alphas without packs, betas without purpose. All were welcome. All were valued. Ilara walked through its halls often, speaking with those who sought shelter. She used her gift to help them heal, to see the threads that bound them to trauma, and to gently untangle those knots. It was hard work, draining, but also deeply fulfilling. One afternoon, as she sat in the sanctuary's garden, a young woman approached. She was thin, scarred, her eyes haunted. "My lady," she said hesitantly, "I heard you were once, like me." "What do you mean?" Ilara asked gently. "Broken, worthless, cast aside." Ilara's chest tightened. She gestured to the bench beside her. "Sit, tell me your story." The woman did. It was a story Ilara knew intimately. Rejection, abuse, chains both literal and metaphorical. When she finished, she looked at Ilara with desperate hope. "Did it get better? Does it ever truly heal?" Ilara took her hand. "The scars don't disappear," she said honestly, "but they stop defining you. You learn to carry them as proof that you survived, that you chose to keep going. How? By finding people who see your worth, by refusing to believe the lies others told about you, and by forgiving yourself for believing those lies, even for a moment. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Ilara hugged her, and as she did, she felt the familiar warmth, the goddess's presence, gentle and affirming. That evening, she returned to the castle to find Kale in their chambers, staring at a letter. His expression was troubled. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the parchment. It was from a neighboring kingdom, a request for aid. A plague had broken out, and they needed healers, supplies, assistance. "We should help," Ilara said immediately. "I agree," Kale said, "but it will stretch our resources thin. And there are those on the council who will argue we should focus on our own people first." Ilara thought of the woman in the garden, of Lucian, of every person who had been cast aside because they weren't deemed valuable enough. "Then we remind them," she said, "that mercy doesn't divide. It multiplies." Kyle smiled, pulling her close. "Have I mentioned lately that you're wiser than half my council?" "Not in the last hour." They sent the aid. It was hard. Supplies ran low, and complaints arose. But slowly, the plague was contained. Lives were saved. And when the neighboring kingdoms sent thanks, along with offers of alliance and trade, even the doubters fell silent. Months later, on a cold winter night, Ilara stood once more on the castle balcony. Snow was falling, soft and steady, blanketing the world in quiet. She felt Kale's presence before he spoke. "Thinking again?" he teased. "Always." She turned to him, a hand resting on her stomach. "But tonight, I'm thinking about the future." He frowned, then understanding dawned. "Ilara, are you—" She nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes." His face transformed, shock, joy, awe cascading across his features. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to her stomach. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." She ran her fingers through his hair. "We're going to have a child, Kale. A little soul who will never know chains, who will grow up knowing they are valued, cherished, free." He stood, kissing her deeply. "Because of you," he said. "All of this, the sanctuary, the alliances, the healing, it started because you refused to believe the lie that you were broken." "No," she corrected gently. "It started because you saw me, really saw me, and chose to break the chains." They stood together as snow fell, two souls who had walked through darkness and chosen light, who had learned that redemption isn't a destination, it's a practice, a daily choice to be merciful, to be brave, to be better. And above them, the moon shone bright, a reminder that even in the coldest night, there is always a light to guide you home. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.